What if the most terrifying moment of a flight wasn't turbulence, but the realization that the sky itself had become a weapon? On the morning of January 8, 2020, a routine departure from Tehran's international airport became a horrifying global headline. This wasn't just any flight. It was Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752, a Boeing 737 filled with students, families, and academics heading for a new life. The contradiction, it was terrifying. Commercial airliners, they're still taking off. The nation, it's braced for military retaliation from a global superpower. For 3 agonizing days, the world was told a simple, tragic story of mechanical failure, a story that would collapse under the weight of its own deception. This is the flight Iran tried to hide from the world. A chronicle of a geopolitical crisis, a calculated lie, and a relentless ongoing fight for a truth that is still being written in the world's highest courts. You see, the chain of events that doomed Flight 752 began 5 days earlier, on January 3, 2020. In a dramatic escalation of tensions, a US drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani, the powerful commander of Iran's elite Quds force. To Iran, this was an act of war. Supreme leader Ali Khamenei promised severe revenge, plunging the region into a state of high alert. Well, on the night of January 7th, Iran delivered its response. Operation Martyr Soleimani saw more than a dozen ballistic missiles rain down on air bases in Iraq housing US troops. In Tehran, the regime's leadership held their breath, anticipating an American counterstrike. Air defense units across the capital were placed on a hair-trigger alert. The US Federal Aviation Administration issued an emergency ban on all American civil aircraft over the region, and major international carriers like Lufthansa and Qantas began rerouting their flights. Yet in Tehran, civilian planes continued to take off. Civil and military authorities made a conscious decision to keep Imam Khomeini International Airport open. This choice stands as the first and perhaps most critical failure of the night, creating a paradox that investigators would later question with chilling implications. Why, on a night of active hostilities, were civilian planes still being cleared for takeoff? Aboard Flight PS-752, the 167 passengers and 9 crew members were settling in for their journey, delayed by about an hour due to an overloaded cargo hold. The passengers, they included 82 Iranians, 11 Ukrainians. But here's what matters. 138 were connecting to Canada, including 55 Canadian citizens and 30 permanent residents. At 6:12 a.m. local time, the Boeing 737 finally lifted off, its passengers oblivious that they were climbing into one of the most dangerous airspaces on the planet. The weapon that ended Flight 752, it was a Russian-made Tor M1. This missile system, it's incredibly sophisticated. The radar, it can detect targets from 25 kilometers away. The tracking system, it handles 10 targets simultaneously. It is designed to be highly resistant to electronic jamming. Crucially, the system includes protocols to identify friendly or neutral aircraft, preventing the very kind of friendly fire incident Iran would later claim occurred. The cost of this system, it's $25 million. The training to operate it, that's another $2 million per crew. Think about this. Iran's official explanation appears starkly simplistic. The final report claims a cascade of catastrophic human errors. An operator failed to properly realign the system's radar after repositioning it, misidentified the civilian jet as a hostile target, and then, in violation of protocol, fired 2 missiles without authorization. They want us to believe in a simultaneous, multi-point failure of technology, procedure, and command and control within an elite IRGC unit on its highest night of alert. But here's the thing. Was it gross incompetence? Or was the human error explanation a convenient narrative to shield senior leadership from accountability? Advanced weapon systems are designed with automated identify friend or foe protocols specifically to prevent this exact kind of tragedy. Yet, the official report claims the operator failed to recognize a civilian airliner on its standard departure route. So here's what doesn't add up. How was a transponder-equipped Boeing 737 electronically broadcasting its civilian identity misidentified as a hostile threat. The report continues by alleging the unit's advanced 3D radar was critically misaligned after being repositioned, causing a significant tracking error. Think about this. On a night of maximum military alert, when precision should have been paramount, what catastrophic breakdown in procedure allowed for such a fundamental calibration failure? But wait, it gets worse. The official story insists a lone operator unilaterally fired 2 missiles, shattering strict rules of engagement that demand authorization from a central command post. They want us to believe in a complete collapse of the military's chain of command at its most crucial moment. At 6:14 a.m., the first missile slammed into the aircraft, knocking out its transponder. For 23 agonizing seconds, the plane continued its trajectory, a silent ghost on radar, before a second missile was launched. The cockpit voice recorder later revealed an unimaginable horror. The crew was alive, aware, and fighting to control their doomed aircraft for 19 seconds after that first impact. If the initial launch was a tragic, panicked mistake, the second seems almost inexplicable. Why fire again at a clearly disabled, non-maneuvering target? The question hangs in the air, a profound challenge to the narrative of simple error and a haunting testament to the final, terrifying moments of Flight 752. In the immediate aftermath, as debris rained down on the fields of Khalilabad, Iran's state-controlled media moved swiftly. The narrative was clear and categorical. Flight 752 had crashed due to a technical problem, likely an engine fire. The head of Iran's civil aviation organization, Ali Abedzadeh, stated with absolute certainty, "Scientifically, it is impossible that a missile hit the Ukrainian plane." This was not the cautious language of an investigation, it was a definitive pronouncement to shut down speculation. While this official narrative was broadcast, a more sinister operation was underway. Eyewitnesses reported bulldozers moving in to clear the crash site, a flagrant violation of international air accident investigation protocols that mandate the preservation of all evidence. It was a literal attempt to bury the truth. The speed and coordination of the denial and the destruction of evidence indicate a deliberate, high-level strategy of deception. But the lie could not hold. Western intelligence agencies briefed journalists on satellite data showing 2 missile launches. Well, the real blow came from ordinary Iranians. Cell phone videos appeared online showing a pinprick of light ascending into the sky, followed by a flash of impact and the horrifying image of the plane as a ball of fire trying to turn back before plummeting to the ground. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the dam of denial broke. On January 11th, 3 days after the crash, the Iranian armed forces released a stunning statement admitting the plane had been unintentionally shot down due to human error. The 3-day lie was over, but the fight for the truth had just begun. The admission of guilt brought the devastating human cost into sharp, unbearable focus. The 176 people aboard were not abstract casualties. They were individuals whose futures were extinguished in minutes. The University of Alberta alone lost 10 professors, students, and alumni, a blow that left the campus reeling. Behind the numbers were intimate stories of stolen lives. Niloufar Ebrahim and Saeed Tahmasbi Kadamasadi were newlyweds flying back to London to begin their life together. When Niloufar's luggage was eventually returned, her wedding jewelry had been looted. Horrifically, DNA tests on their repatriated remains revealed their caskets contained the body parts of other passengers, a grotesque desecration born from the careless handling of the crash site. The horror for families inside Iran did not end with their loss. They were subjected to a systematic campaign of harassment and intimidation by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Grieving relatives were pressured to give state-approved interviews, and funerals were commandeered and turned into propaganda events. In a cynical act of narrative manipulation, the regime declared the victims martyrs, attempting to reframe the story from one of state brutality to one of patriotic sacrifice, a narrative the families fiercely resisted. This campaign of narrative control revealed the regime's deep-seated fear. The family's grief was a direct threat to the state's legitimacy, a symbol of its catastrophic failure. That grief had to be controlled, co-opted, or crushed. Iran's confession unleashed a wave of fury across the country. protests erupted at universities, with students chanting "Death to the liars" and deliberately avoiding walking over American and Israeli flags painted on the ground, a rejection of the regime's ideology it had used to excuse the disastrous mistake. Internationally, the battle for a credible investigation began. Canada, Ukraine, Sweden, and the United Kingdom formed the International Coordination and Response Group to demand accountability, but Iran engaged in a strategy of obstruction. It held the plane's black boxes for 7 months before finally sending them to France for analysis under immense pressure. In March 2021, Iran released its final report. It was immediately condemned as a whitewash. The report doubled down on the human error narrative, blaming a single, low-level unit. Canada's Transportation Safety Board issued a scathing critique, concluding that Iran's report explained what happened, but completely failed to explain why. It offered no evidence for its claims of a misaligned radar and failed to answer the most critical question: why was Tehran's airspace not closed to civilian traffic on a night of heightened military alert? Seeing no path forward, the coordination group declared further attempts to negotiate with Iran futile. The battle for truth was moving to the international courtroom. With the official investigation exposed as a sham, the victims' families refused to be silenced. They transformed their profound grief into a powerful and relentless global advocacy movement, transitioning from mourners into meticulous investigators and fierce international litigants. Their central mission became the pursuit of a truth far darker than the official narrative of incompetence. Central to their case is a chilling but strategically plausible theory that Iran intentionally kept its civilian airspace open on a night of active warfare. The motivation, they argue, was to use passenger jets filled with innocent people as human shields. In this terrifying scenario, commercial airliners departing from Tehran would serve as a radar-cluttering deterrent, forcing any potential American counterstrike to risk causing a massive civilian catastrophe, thereby creating a diplomatic shield for the regime. This theory reframes the disaster from a disastrous mistake to a calculated high-stakes gamble where the 176 lives aboard Flight 752 were deemed tragically expendable. This central theory, however, is not the only alternative to the official story. Other hypotheses have emerged from the murky geopolitical landscape. One suggests the downing was the result of a catastrophic communication breakdown within a fractured command structure, where hardline IRGC elements, paranoid and expecting an imminent US attack, acted on their own initiative, bypassing a more cautious central command. Another, more sinister theory posits that the act was deliberate, intended to send a brutal message to the West and create a crisis that would rally the Iranian population around the flag. Proponents of this view point to the second missile, fired at an already crippled and non-threatening aircraft, as evidence of intent rather than panic. Lacking definitive proof, these theories underscore the profound distrust in the Iranian regime's narrative and fuel the family's quest for answers. The legal battle has become a slow, grinding war of attrition fought on multiple international fronts. At the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, the coordination group representing nations that lost citizens argues that Iran fundamentally breached the 1944 Chicago Convention by using military weapons against a civil aircraft. Predictably, Iran has challenged the ICAO's jurisdiction, a legal maneuver designed to stall and deflect. A separate, more direct case was filed at the International Court of Justice, accusing Iran of violating the 1971 Montreal Convention, which explicitly outlaws acts of violence against civil aviation. While this case proceeds, a final resolution is expected to take several years, a frustrating timeline for those seeking justice. Frustrated by the slow pace of state-led actions, the Families Association has forged its own path, submitting a request to the International Criminal Court. They argue the downing constitutes a war crime and a crime against humanity, placing the actions of specific individuals within the IRGC's chain of command under the microscope. The outcome of these challenges will have profound implications far beyond this single tragedy. Unlike Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, where blame was attributed to non-state actors, here a sovereign state's military has admitted to the act. If Iran, through legal stonewalling and political maneuvering, succeeds in evading meaningful accountability, it will set a dangerous precedent. It would signal to other rogue states that the legal and political consequences for such an atrocity are manageable. This fight is no longer just about one flight. It is a battle for the integrity of international law and the fundamental principle that the skies must remain safe for all. Was the downing of this flight a disastrous mistake born from the chaos of a nation on the brink of war, or do the contradictions and the cover-up point to something far more sinister? Share your thoughts in the comments.